Welcome to Subscription Prescription, the podcast where you get the information you need to scale your subscription program. Hello and welcome to another dose of Subscription Prescription. I'm your host, Matthew Holman. This is the podcast where we try to help you figure out everything related to D2C subscriptions. And I'm really excited for this week's dose because one of the biggest, most important pieces of subscriptions is how you communicate with your customers. And I am joined today with Riley Trepanier, a communications specialist. Hi,
Hey.
Riley.
How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you? Thanks for coming on.
Good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So Riley, you have a lot of experience in communications major. You've worked with a lot of brands like Sportsish, Cozy Earth, Dime Beauty. You're now working with me and a lot of the work we do at Subscription Prescription. I'd love for you to tell a little bit more about your background, and then we're going to jump right into what communications is.
Sweet. Okay. Yeah. So I studied communications at BYU, Idaho with a PR emphasis. I've always gravitated towards relationships and words, and I just felt like that was a really good happy medium for me. I also just feel like I have a lot of experience in the startup space. I've loved that. I love the hustle of it, coming in and just kind of being able to make it your own, essentially, especially in regards to communications, because it can be a little bit all over the place. Right. So I've had 5+ years of working mostly in e-commerce startup spaces, but also a little bit of agency, a lot of contracting and freelance. But that's just a little bit about my background.
Cool.
Yeah.
So communications, I mean, I think, you know, on the D2C side, we all know what ads are. We all know, I think we all know what creative is and email marketing. But when it comes to brand and communications, like those are two things that I think of that are maybe feel a little more nebulous, that maybe not everybody, I mean, we all know what communication, the word means. But how do you view, or how would you explain to somebody what the communications field is about, and especially for like in D2C?
For sure. I think like communications is the bridge between the brand and the customer. And so in order to like effectively communicate and let them know that your product or service is worth it, whether they're subscribing or doing a one-time purchase, like you need to convey to them that it is no longer a need, but a want. And that can only be really done through communications.
So does that mean like you're doing a lot of copy?
Yeah.
Is it like about messaging? Like
a lot of copy. You're going to like refine your brand voice. Everything should be consistent and cohesive, but it's copy on your product pages, in your email flows, on your ads, in your ads, on your videos. Like it's internal, all internal and external communications being on brand, benefit focused, and just really giving the customer a good understanding of what you are and what you do and the benefits and the benefits and what they can expect, the results they can expect from the product.
Okay, I feel like you just said so many things. No. I mean, like, that's so many things. Like, that's going to be the entire meat of the episode. So, like, because my first reaction to this is like, okay, well, that sounds like communications is literally touching everything.
Yes.
And that feels a little overwhelming.
It
like,
is.
Trying to manage all the things. Like,
yes.
So, depending on whether you're just getting started or you're a $20-30 million brand, like, how do you organize comms? Is there like a brand guidebook for communications, or how should you be thinking about how to organize that and ensuring some kind of consistency?
Totally. I mean, I think there's going to be a different approach for every brand. Like you said, if you're in a startup or you are a $30 million company, there's like ways I like to approach it. And like in my head, there's like 3 easy communication wins. And that's going to be like optimizing your product page, making sure that the copy is clear, it's simple, it's concise, but it's also communicating exactly what the customer needs to know. It's supported by brand authorities, whether that's like PR quotes, reviews, UGC, studies in some cases, and then also again supported by videos and imagery that all together support it and continue to communicate and reassure that. So that would be like what I would like to say the first one is. The second one is going to be email flows. I'm sure you know how important those are, and like we talk about it a lot. Specifically like the onboarding or welcome series, I think it's your first chance to start building a relationship with your customer. And so it's like bridging again that gap of being like, this is what we're here to do. This is what we're going to do for you. And it's just another touch point to clearly communicate what they can expect and continue to grow your community like within your brand. The third I would probably say is like personalization. This can be throughout your website, throughout your emails, in your discounts, what you're doing with influencers. I mean, it's literally in everything, but I think if you're personalizing your communication a little bit more to be a little bit more specific to your audience and whatnot.
What are some ways you suggest doing that? Because personalization, I feel like, is a big buzzword. And
that's fair.
now we have AI coming in.
Yes.
AI is going to, make personalization so much easier. But how do you get into personalization? And maybe that's through segmentation of like, how would you approach personalization for a brand that's more than just like, insert first name here kind of thing?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, obviously that's the best way to go about it is the insert first name here. But like the segmentation aspect of it depending on if you have multiple SKUs and what they're purchasing and just like suggesting products that based on their past purchase history might be specific to them. And then like why, obviously, again, you're backing what you're suggesting with your communications. Also in maybe it's discount codes or in your email flows that I personally like love the all text emails right now. And that's where I think personalization is huge, where it's feels more personable coming from like a founder or like the face of your brand. I know like I have seen a lot of success using those and a lot of other people as well. Just because it feels more personable and that there is a connection and a relationship.
Opposed to the big fancy branded email.
Yeah.
That was obviously created by somebody for everybody.
And I think there's just more of a balance there, like just throwing one in, whether it's a campaign or a flow, and then maybe including a personalized discount with that so that they know that their loyalty is being recognized and whatnot. So there's lots of ways you can go about it.
Yeah, I think the segmenting is a big one, right? Like that's one of the things I harp on a lot is like, if you say best examples, say selling protein powder, right? Like,
totally.
Are you buying that because you're bulking up? Are you cutting down? Or is it a meal supplement? Like, what are your goals associated with that? And depending on what those are, you can create a segmented audience with some more specific messaging to them.
For sure. Yeah, no, I think that's cool. And that's a good example.
When you see, like, when we're talking about communications, what are some of the top, like, mistakes you see brands making, or like, as a consumer, you're getting emails, or when you're working with a brand, what are some of the things you see that are like, could be a little bit better, or is it more consistency? What do you see as being like some of the mistakes?
Yeah, I do think consistency is huge, and that is a really big undertaking because when you have so many different teams managing so many different platforms, it is hard to be consistent in your brand voice and whatnot. But I think over communicating, and I know that sounds contradicting, but sometimes you don't want to cannibalize the customer by giving them too much information. It should be clear, digestible, and they should just like know right off of the bat what they're looking at, not something they have to dig for information. And so I think that is often times where you can see.
No, that's a great point, because I think, and you're making me feel smarter for having said that, is that reviewing an email and say, like, because one of the things, you've probably heard me talk about, we're working on is every email should have a single goal, right? And if you're trying to put, like, say it's a health supplement, right? Because I've seen this with a couple brands, is that they'll have 6-7 important resources and questions that they're answering and explaining all in a single email. And you're like, oh my goodness, this could be a whole email series all in and of itself.
Yes.
And by the way, like, your top churn point, this like sixth thing addresses your top churn point, and there's no way most people are scanning or reading the whole email to get to that. It should be the only thing.
Exactly.
Okay, so simplifying it. And I think that makes sense too within subscriptions, because like I just mentioned, like, if you know what some of the top reasons or complaints people have, top reasons people cancel, you should start leading with those. You can always add on more information down the road, or share stuff with people about your brand.
Yeah.
Okay, so over communicating being a mistake, and it sounds like you talked about some of the three different ways people can have quick wins. Are there other opportunities you see in communications when evaluating or looking at a brand, like things that they could just simplify, or they're overthinking it? Like, what's something you would share as an opportunity in the communication side of a brand?
I think based off of that, I think like two words that come to my mind, and maybe this is broader than just communications, but I really do find that brands that have a solid community and like why behind them resonates with me more personally. And so like any opportunity that you have to establish your brand more so as something that is not just a product or a service, but a community where they can find resources and people who have other like interests in common and like whatnot, I think is just, it sets you up for the future and like makes like increases longevity, I think, more so.
So when you say that, it makes me think of like, so the idea of like, okay, when we're writing copy, right? We can like copy 101's listing benefits.
Yeah.
Copy 102 maybe is talking about outcomes. But that third level would feel like more aspirational, like this dream or this goal. Is that kind of what you're talking about with the community side of things?
So aspirational in the sense of like, whether that's you're coming to social media to find something that's also like a brand you love because of a product you love, but also the comments are hilarious and the caption is really just resonating with your mood that day. And it just feels bigger and more emotional. And that again plays into copy because it's how you're communicating with your customer. But I think like the emotional aspect of it is huge.
Okay, well now that made me think, where do you go for copy inspiration for ideas when you're trying to be a little bit funny or a little bit like, trying to be a little bit more real or human when you're thinking about that? Obviously, if I have a community like on Facebook where I have 1,000 people posting every day, I can go grab content from them, but that's not what everybody's got.
I think like a huge thing is taking advantage of the resources that you do have, whether it's the comments on your social media page, the reviews that you're receiving, negative or positive, like what you're getting back, like in those cancellation flows, like any feedback is good feedback. And also like utilizing your customer service reps and like stuff that they're seeing and hearing every day, and how you can spin that or turn that, or like I've seen brands read reviews or customer service responses and turn it into like a funny segment where they're just like laughing about silly things people left.
There was one recently, I'm trying to remember, where they took a review because the guy was complaining about something like totally unrelated to their product. Like it was like a 4 or 5 star review, but it was negative sounding. Like it didn't, cure cancer or something like that. And then the brand like took it and said, "Yeah, sorry, we're working on it." Like kind of leaning into that. So I was curious. So we've talked about like product pages and emails. Like I'm curious about how you feel about some of this in relation to like social media. Like, because a question that I know that a lot of brands are wondering is like, how should I be behaving or interacting on social? We were talking before we started filming about Duolingo as like a funny example of a consumer app that my family is currently using, and how irreverent and fun they are. Like, how does that communication strategy expand into social media? Is it similar to like how you were just talking about it, or is there maybe a little bit of a different way to think about how should I be on Instagram or Twitter or Snap or wherever my consumers are, as opposed to say my website or my email, that type of copy?
Yeah. I think that like something people often overlook is, while we have this demographic and this audience of like what we think our target customer is, you're always going to have those people that are not within that. And by treating each platform as its own, but still maintaining some form of consistency, is going to allow you to be a little bit more playful on social media. Like on TikTok, it's going to be completely different than what you're seeing on Instagram, vice versa, of like what you're sending in your emails. It's going to be a lot more professional and educational. And so like, I think just understanding what your audience is and knowing that it's more shareable and that you're going to get a lot more eyes and engagement, and adjusting your copy or your communication to reflect that and not just be so stiff and like feel personable.
But how do you balance between, say, doing something really fun like Duolingo's like their Bird is Dead campaign, versus like, say, they have content around how quickly you can learn a new language, right? So it's like the informative, this is how our product works, versus, hey, this is funny, it's going to get us like 100x views on social. Like, is there a formula you follow? Like, I mean, how would you think about the different types of content you would be putting out on social for that?
Yeah, I feel like it's just a mindset. And I know that might not be the most helpful answer.
Well, you can unpack the mindset for
us.
Us.
Well, it's just like, if I'm on social media, I'm most likely coming there to consume something that's not so heavy, if that makes sense. And so like, if I'm looking at a skincare page or Duolingo, for example, like I kind of want to be entertained, or I want to know how Hailey Bieber's doing her skincare routine or something like that. And so it needs to feel a little bit more lighthearted and not so serious, at least to me. And that's like my interpretation. And that's what I like to apply, where the customer is still getting something from it. And it's like leaving an impression, but it's also not bombarding them and turning them away.
Right.
If that makes sense.
How do you feel about the idea of like only going after certain platforms that work for you, as opposed to trying to go after as many as possible? Because I know that, like, so for us, for example, like for a little while, we were publishing this podcast into multiple places. And it felt like it wasn't really working. So we
Yeah.
just went back to Twitter and LinkedIn because that's where I spend the most time. Like,
Mm-hmm.
do you think brands need to try to be everywhere, or should they just try to be really good at one, or does
Yeah.
it depend on resources?
I think it can be sometimes confusing because I have seen brands in the past where I'm like, stumble across their TikTok and I'm like, wait, this is that brand? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, it just feels like it's almost trying. It doesn't feel organic in some sense. And some brands can get away with that. But I do think, like, where you've seen success and knowing what works for you and starting there until you can, like, fully, like, expand into that category as much as possible, and then knowing, okay, let's do more. And so I think where you see success, making that the best you can, but then further expanding.
Yeah.
I don't think pushing it too hard, it kind of feels like inorganic sometimes.
Right. No, that's a great point. Okay, so thinking again about subscription brands, like what are some of the biggest opportunities you see from like a communication standpoint for subscription brands that are looking to improve not just subscriber acquisition, but the retention side of things as well?
Yeah, I think education. The customer has to know what they are getting into in order to like retain them and avoid them churning. It's like if they don't fully understand the capabilities of the product or services, what's keeping them there? You know, they're just using it once and they're not noticing the benefits. Well, have you used it for 3 months? Because that's what's recommended. You know what I mean? And to order to fully see benefits and whatnot. Or like, did you wash it wrong? Like, it really just depends on the product or the service, but fully educating that. And I think that goes into like your email and your SMS, and there can be like a lot of synergy there to like support each other. That can also be social media campaigns. That is also like a graphic on a product page. I think it's all just like full circle, and there's so much you can do behind the education of why and what your product does and how it like serves the customer. And yeah, I just I love it. I love education.
I mean, no, I think it's a great point. Like some of the brands that I've audited in the past where I see upsells happening right away when they already know the top reason people churn is because like they don't last long enough.
Yeah.
Like, say like you mentioned 3 months, it's like, okay, even if the recommended time is 60 days, right? Like if that's a problem, why are you upselling them into another product? You should be relying on those first few touch points to say like, hey, it takes 60 days. Here's reviews from people that tried it for 60 days. Here's what people say when they stopped it too soon.
Before and afters or anything.
And afters, challenges, stuff like that. I think that's a really, really, really great point. Do you have a favorite subscription right now?
I do. It's kind of like TMI, but whatever. The brand is called Eucora.
Okay.
I feel like they might be smaller, but I definitely got the targeted ads for it. They're more of like a feminine health brand and whatnot. But they like, this was before I had even met you and whatever. And I just feel like they were the first brand that I saw that genuinely made subscriptions like a no-brainer. And like
what were they doing?
So it's for UTIs.
Okay.
But they sell their products individually, but the upsell worked on me right away because it's a 3-part system, and it's like 2 pills and then like a drink supplement. And hearing the story from the founder was like, that was the ad, and that's what directly resonated with me. And I was like, that's me. Like, it couldn't have felt more whatever. And then when I went to purchase it, I was like, dang, this is kind of expensive. But then like the discount they were offering, I was like, oh, of course. Like, I am not going to buy this one time. I will be using this subscription. And then I got the product. The emails I received after it, the text support, like all of the communication throughout just felt so seamless to me. And just like, again, answering all of those questions that I might have had. And then it worked.
Right.
And so I was like, of course, like this is my holy grail.
Right,
and so,
So it was a great offer. Like it spoke to a problem you had a great offer. The discount on the subscription felt like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
You followed it up with education. Obviously the product had to work. Otherwise you wouldn't stay subscribed.
Yeah.
That does sound like the recipe for like a great subscription program. I'm curious, what would you say if I told you, or we had a client or somebody we were looking at that said like, hey, I don't want to send all of those extra educational emails because I'm worried about people churning?
I will say it didn't feel like too much, because I feel like being in the e-commerce space or the retention space, I feel hyper aware to too many sends. Right. And so I'm like, that's something I'm constantly noticing. And I'm like, I'm unsubscribing. Like, this is too much. But it was like 2 to 3. Like, it wasn't overwhelming. and it was just very clear, concise, and just straight to the point. They did have like a video at like the end of one of the emails, I think, to like additionally support it. Yeah, and you've got like, you can go to FAQ pages and chat with customer support, but it just felt like there was a lot of support and education around it, and it just like made sense.
Okay.
So if you're avoiding churn and like you're scared about that, I think like you're not doing this in every flow. Like this is, like I said, the first relationship that you're building with that customer, and it's leaving a good impression. And so I don't think over communicating in the beginning is a bad thing, but I think doing it, that is not too many words.
Right.
Like I think there's just a strategic way to go about it.
Well, that, and I think too, like sometimes brands forget that there's a lot more content coming to them from the brand. Like the upcoming billing reminder email is usually what we hear about people not liking, but you know, there's order confirmations, right? There's like your order is shipped stuff. Like they might actually follow you on social and see some of your content. So like there's already touch points happening. And to me, it feels like if you don't try to lean into it at least a little bit, then you let the transactional and whatever random social post you had go out that day
it doesn't mean anything.
Be the thing that they're that's affecting them, which is nothing. As opposed to trying to get something like a little bit more powerful, a little bit more impactful.
Yeah. Hot take on the upcoming billing reminders and like the order confirmations. Like I want to know what's going on. Like I paid money for this. So like I want to know when it's shipping and I want to know all those things. But I also want to know if my like payment is being processed again, because for me, I'm like, you just did it and didn't tell me, like that's not cool. And so like I think it goes to the honesty and the relationship aspect of it, of being like, oh, I can pause this for 3 months and come back and I'll be okay, rather than having no idea and getting charged.
We did some content recently about that, so I want to be careful we don't spend too much time
worrying
about
it's okay.
it. No, because everybody's like, oh geez, Matt, we get it, we want upcoming billing reminders to be sent. But I will say, I remember the thing I want to get to. It left me again. It was 2 weeks ago. Pretty boy. Oh, okay. Okay, so I had a question, because 2 weeks ago we had we interviewed the founders of Yo Pretty Boy, which is a men's skincare brand, and they had a really interesting question they asked me about that I want to get your take on from a communication standpoint. So this is a little bit of background. Yo Pretty Boy started out, they are skincare that does really well with like rosacea, red skin. I'm a prime target. I've been using it, really like it. And so they have this question of like, how do we go from this market that we know we do really well in to try to get more and more guys to care about our skincare product that maybe aren't just dealing with red skin as an issue. So it's this question of like, okay, we have our comms in our ads, comms on our product page, comms in our follow-up, like all these touch points. I think they're doing a really good job of nailing. But do they risk losing the conversions that they get from being hyper-focused as they go bigger? Like that's a problem I think a lot of brands face, is you start out niche down on a problem, you crush that problem. How do you expand into either other problems or to a broader market? Which again, for guys, skincare is a little bit tough because most guys ignore skincare and some guys don't. So how, from a communication standpoint, how would you like frame that problem and potentially tackle that problem?
You're gonna get a really long-winded answer here because I feel like I'm a skincare girly. I've worked for 2 skincare brands in the past, and it is something I'm just genuinely passionate about. So I think there's a lot you can do with skincare. Most of the time, I'm not familiar with this product, but most of the time in skincare, your products are doing more than just one thing. And I think finding a different way to advertise that, if it's specifically for rosacea, ingredients are so complex that I guarantee you that main ingredient that is targeting rosacea is also doing X, Y, and Z that are these underlying benefits that people don't even know they're getting to. And so just doing more education and more research behind the ingredients and the problem and the solution that one product can actually be really great for rosacea, and it can be really great for, I don't know, dark spots or anti-aging. Like there's just so many things.
Their whole product position is they took some of the top performing ingredients from like hyaluronic acid and a couple others, and they put it all in one. So it's kind of like they call the all-in-one moisturizer because it does so many things in one thing.
So then I think if it's the all-in-one moisturizer, you're now targeting people seasonally, you know, that don't just have rosacea, but they have really bad dry winter skin. You're talking to people who maybe just have different skin types, right? So like there's just so many different ways that you can market that one product, especially in skincare, to apply to so many different skin problems.
So when you're thinking about like, okay, so I'm thinking about that. All right, here's all the different ad or creative stuff I might want to try testing, but I'm not going to spin up 50 different landing pages for all of those.
Like, for sure.
So is it simplifying some of the messaging then on the product page so that it can answer some of those common questions about how it works, the value? You mentioned some of the things like reviews, studies if applicable, stuff like that, to try to drive conversions. And then afterwards, if I've asked for specific problems, like in a pop-up or a post-purchase survey, I can then
address them further.
Address them, segment them further.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just think skincare is so interesting in that sense. You can do so much with it.
All right. Well, we might connect you with him so we can chat through some of the ideas. Okay. We talked about it on the podcast for about 20 minutes.
Oh gosh.
About some of the different approaches. Yeah. But again, it's hard, right? Go broad or go narrow. Like we face that in our business and social, all the things. Like, I guess it's kind of like a final question from your communication standpoint. How do you feel about that? Like on social as a brand from a positioning standpoint, the idea that I want to try to go, we've all heard it before. If you try to speak to everyone, you speak to no one. But yet you see somebody like Nike or other brands that are layering their messaging.
Yeah.
They're going big picture for some people, and then they're narrowing and getting hyper-focused. Now, we all don't have the resources of Nike.
Yeah.
So how would you say like the average e-com brand approach this idea of go wide to try to get new people top of funnel versus being hyper-focused lower in the funnel?
I feel like it's kind of a long game. And I think like addressing your customer that you know is loyal to you. And then once you feel like you've maxed that out, okay, what's our secondary audience? What's the third audience? What, like top of funnel versus lower funnel? Like who are people that we can easily secure without breaking the bank and whatnot? But also, like I said, playing the long game in it, slowly adjusting, slowly incorporating, whether that's like youthfulness or like older audiences and whatnot, and just things that would appeal to them. And so I think sometimes it is over ambitious to try to get anyone and everyone, because you're right, we're not all Nike and we haven't been around as long as Nike. And so we need to like what's achievable and like focus really good there until we've honed that in, and now we're moving on and like growing with it.
I like that idea of slowly changing, like adding layers.
I liked what you said, the layer aspect. I think it's a good visual.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, Riley, thank you so much for coming on the show. For anybody interested in connecting with Riley, you can find you on LinkedIn.
Yes,
best place.
I'm on LinkedIn.
Okay, absolutely.
Absolutely. For sure.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on the show. And that's it for another week of Subscription Prescriptions. Stay tuned for another dose next Tuesday. That's it for today. Thank you for tuning in. Please subscribe so that you can get notified when new episodes come out each week on Tuesdays.